Hi, and welcome to Thrive, the show where I bring you tips, resources, and people to help you create a more abundant life and business. You're in for high-value content coming to you from industry leaders who are growing their business, making an impact, and rocking their brands. And today is a very special episode of Thrive. It's the first episode since the pandemic. Today I have Kim Driscoll, who is one of the Democratic candidates for the Lieutenant Governor position in the state of Massachusetts. And Kim is currently serving as the mayor of Salem, Massachusetts, where she served since 2006. And she is a former deputy city manager for the city of Chelsea. And I'm so excited to have her here. She is running against two other Democratic candidates. And we're here to talk today about why she should be lieutenant governor and what her dreams and visions are for the state of Massachusetts. So thank you so much for coming, Kim.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and I am so excited to be sitting across from a woman candidate. That is so wonderful.
The future is female, and this year we have a lot of women candidates in just about every cycle, and it's been exciting to think about the opportunity finally to elect not only one woman to the corner office, but hopefully two.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was going to ask you that question. How do you think it benefits not just women, but everybody to have more women in office?
You know, I think the lived experience that you bring to these roles, whether it's a mayor, I'm the first female mayor of Salem, so, you know, that's a perspective that has never been in the city's leadership post. My office every day, I have a group of men, primarily white men who were former mayors, who are in the office, and so I'm reminded that there is a difference in terms of the experience you bring, the perspective you bring, and the opportunity to impact policy, and equally important, the opportunity to see young women who can see themselves in these roles. I think that's really, really critical. I think there should be more women in C-suites, in city halls, in the State House, and certainly, hopefully someday soon, a woman president, and put us in a position to make sure we're not forgetting about the issues that matter. Most importantly, that empowerment of women who see themselves in these shoes, in these roles moving forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the more empowered women are, the better it is for our communities. So,
100%.
Yeah, and you have been serving your communities for a long time, both in Salem and in Chelsea. Can you tell us like some of the things that you're most proud of that you've accomplished in those roles?
You know, when you are in local government, I think it's the branch of government that most people rely on their daily lives the most, right? Mm-hmm. Educating your kids, keeping your neighborhood safe, investing in those places people make memories, also, you know, ensuring that you have some economic prosperity happening. And so to be able to live in and lead your community is really a great honor. I've been blessed to have been reelected 5 times in Salem in a community that I'm not a native of. I'm actually a Navy brat. I was born in Hawaii, lived all over. I came to Salem to go to college and just felt very much at home. Felt like I had a hometown and, you know, fell in love with the city, fell in love with my husband, Nick. Yeah. And so to be able to give back to the place that you live and in a meaningful way, serving as mayor is one of the best ways you can do that. It allows you to also, I think, as an executive, like see a problem and fix it. I like to say in local government, you have to get stuff done. You're making decisions for neighbors, for friends, for people you're going to see the next day. I think it makes you a better listener. I think it makes you more accountable. And it also gives you this sense of urgency, like how are we going to solve the challenge? What are the ways we can lean into the work? And what are the outcomes that happen? And so I think I'm really proud of being like an innovative executive. We don't pick up trash the way we did 10 years ago. We don't solve crimes the way we did 10 years ago. We're always looking to get better, and that continuous improvement, that curiosity that's sort of built into the culture at City Hall. I think that's really crucial and something I hope to bring to the State House as well.
Yeah, it's such a great point, because if you're driving down a bumpy road and then you see Kim at the grocery store, you're like, hey Kim, what about my road?
No hiding, like no hiding. And it's a good thing because, you know, if you care, like I said, if you care about where you live, you want to make things better and you have that direct access to people every day. It certainly keeps you humble. Having kids keeps you humble. My kids were 3, 5, and 9 when I became mayor. So like you get home, you're not the mayor, you know, you are where's dinner? You know, what do you mean you need red tights and you have a play tomorrow, you know? Yeah. So it's been a real journey, one I'm fortunate to be a part of and grateful for the opportunity of.
Yeah, and you said something, it's skipping ahead a little bit and assuming that you are already in the role of Lieutenant Governor. But
let's envision that.
Yeah, let's envision that. And you mentioned that your dad was in the Navy.
Yeah.
And I think that there's this misconception in our country that Democrats are not pro-military.
Couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, if you think about Massachusetts, a largely blue state, we are one of the states that treats our veterans with the most benefits. Folks who are returning from service, the sort of opportunities for both economic investment that we make, preference for jobs, the GI Bill, it's matched at the state level as well. I think we really understand fully, the cradle of democracy started here in Massachusetts, and I think we recognize that we want to give back to people who are ensuring it stays a cradle of democracy moving forward.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that we talked about it used to be blue, mostly Democratic in Massachusetts, and I think it was the cover of Boston Magazine a couple months ago was talking about how Massachusetts is turning purple.
There's definitely some purple areas. I'm traveling around the Commonwealth, and it's a big state when you've got to get around it. And there's uniqueness in lots of different places. That characters of the neighborhoods are different. The challenges that they have might be different. There's a lot of things that knit us together, but there are definitely some differences. And there are parts of the Commonwealth that are really conservative, and there are parts of the Commonwealth that are really progressive. And I think it's a state that definitely is varied. We certainly tend to elect Democrats in bulk and large, but it doesn't mean that everyone's lock, stock, and barrel in just one direction here.
Yeah, and if you were lieutenant governor, how would you kind of reach out to those folks there, and in the way that you serve, that it shows that you're serving everybody?
One of the reasons I am really enjoying local government is because it's nonpartisan. You don't get elected on a party ticket in local government. And I like to say there's no Republican or Democratic pothole. There's a pothole. It just needs to get fixed.
That's such a great line.
Right? And we've got to sort of approach governing that way. Of course, I bring democratic values. I'm a strong Democrat. I feel like I've led my community with important values in mind, welcoming and inclusive, standing up for working families and seniors and veterans and immigrants, our LGBTQ friends and neighbors. But when you're delivering services, you can be someone who has democratic values, but you got to deliver for everybody. And you can't be so partisan that we can't get things done. Like, that's what's happening in Washington. It's broken. People don't expect that out of their local government, and we sure can't afford it at the state level either.
No, I totally agree. No matter if you're a Democratic or a Republican Party, you're serving all the people of the state.
Got to get stuff done. Yeah. I know that as a mayor. You've got to get stuff done.
Yes, but you are the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor. So how would you differentiate yourself from the other two candidates who are also running?
Yeah, I'm fortunate in Worcester in June to win the Democratic nominee from the state party. Those are convention delegates who come together and select who they want representing them. But we also have two other candidates who are legislators. And I do think there's a difference being a mayor. You're an executive, the buck stops with you. You've got to put together budgets every day. You've got to negotiate with a legislative body. You've got to negotiate with collective bargaining unions and frankly with residents. I like to say I have a 45,000 person board of directors, right? And you are in charge of making sure decisions are made. And this position that I'm seeking is also part of the executive branch, where you're delivering services. You're responsible for budgets. You see a problem and you're going to have to work with partners like you do in local government, both private sector and public sector, to attack it. And so that experience being on the ground, that no hiding, I don't talk about problems in the abstract, right? We've expanded childcare opportunities in my community, expanded pre-K. We've worked to address our transportation woes. We didn't wait for Boston to solve that. We bought our own city-owned ferry, have a whole ride-share service and car-share service and other ways to get around. We've implemented models to think about the climate crisis and how we're going to address that from a local issue. But as mayor, I know you can't do it alone. So this combination of experience on the ground with the opportunity to serve at the state level and bridge those resources, that technical gap, the opportunity to be a convener, and make sure we've got thriving communities. Because at the end of the day, when our communities are thriving, our Commonwealth is thriving. And that's that skill set I hope to match up in this role.
Yeah, and I love that you're talking about all of the communities of Massachusetts, that we are a state, and we are a state different and separate as part of the Union of the United States, and there have been a lot of hot button topics that have happened at the federal level, and states have different views, different laws, different policies. How do you see Massachusetts protecting what it values in terms of abortion rights, gun rights, all of those hot button topics from the influence of what's going on in the other parts of the country, the Supreme Court and the Fed?
I think Massachusetts is a real beacon. I feel fortunate to live here. When you think about abortion rights, I feel like when we all woke up and read that Dobbs decision, that we turned the clock back 50 years. I mean, it really, right? A combination of rage, hurt, pain. and how, we didn't just channel that into nothing, right? We've really stepped up as a Commonwealth to make sure we're supporting our abortion rights providers. We're making sure we're ready and prepared to welcome individuals from other states who may not have that same opportunity where they live. We're calling out the disingenuous, pregnancy crisis centers who oftentimes are, providing misleading information to women in particular. So, and recognizing that abortion rights are healthcare, right? And this is something that I think we don't talk about enough. This really will disempower women if you're putting them in a position of forcing somebody to be pregnant. And so I'm hopeful that when I'm in the State House, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected to this position, we can continue in that tradition of stepping up, being that beacon, showing other states that this is a place that cares about these fundamental freedoms. We lead the nation in some of the lowest gun violence, and yet our gun laws are being curbed by, I think, an overzealous Supreme Court that uses stare decisis in a way that they want to meet their outcomes. Certainly shows that presidential elections have consequences. We're paying the price for some of that now. But all the more reason that we need strong, experienced leadership in the State House to make sure our values here are being held up and we can continue to be that beacon for other places in this country to show this is what happens in a place that allows values and follows fundamental freedoms and strikes, I think, a positive stance for maintaining some of the fundamental freedoms we've had, for decades that are being stripped away.
Yeah, I always think about the gun laws and the gun rights. If you want to load your musket, go ahead. But what civilian needs an automatic rifle?
I mean, Salem is the birthplace of the National Guard, largely because it was the Salem Common where militia, these were, farmers and merchants and, early days came together to protect their common good. They never would have imagined having the sorts of weapons available to, individuals that we do here. And we know so many other, countries. We see what happens when you have unfettered access to guns and when you don't. And so, I'm proud of what we've done here in Massachusetts, and we'll continue to be a strident, supporter of the efforts we've taken to curb gun violence, to make sure our kids are safe in schools. As both a mom, the chair of a school committee, these are important issues that affect everyone's daily life. And anything we can do to make sure we're standing up for what's right, I hope to be a part of.
And you keep talking about Salem, and I can tell you have so much pride about it. And one of the stories that I was reminded that when I heard you were coming was I read a couple of weeks ago about a North Andover, I think it was an 8th grade history class, did a project where they actually got Charlie Baker to exonerate a witch from Salem from, 200 years ago.
Yeah. Amazing, right?
Amazing. And the thing that I loved about it was it showed the power that the people have. Yeah. When you're engaged in your community, when you're engaged with your government, and you understand that you have a voice and you're aware of the issues that are going on, what changes you can make as an individual. So my question to you is, the primaries are coming up, and a lot of people don't vote in primaries.
I know.
So what can be done? What do you want to say to people who sit back and are like, I'm gonna wait until the general election, or I don't. Personally, I'm like, people are like, I don't want to talk about politics. This is your country, this is your town, this is your government. These are the people that you are sharing potholes with as you drive down the street. So what would you say to people about being more involved in local and federal politics or their elections?
I mean, democracy is not a spectator sport. We need people up, engaged, not just voting, but following what's happening so you can be an informed voter. The issues that matter most in your lives, whether it's the fundamental freedoms we were just talking about, like abortion or guns, or what's happening in your community. The type of funding you have for your schools, the places that you go to, whether it's a park or a road or a sidewalk that are impacted by who's in office. Mm-hmm. We're fortunate, I think, that we have these amazing rights. We talked about veterans earlier. My dad's a vet, folks who've sacrificed so we would have the opportunity to go vote. And then the folks who say, well, it doesn't matter. We had an election in my community where somebody won one of our counselors by one vote, one vote, or the consequences of who you elect as president and what kind of Supreme Court you get out of that. So elections matter. Democracy requires that you not only be engaged in actively voting in all of our elections, but that you do so from an engaged and informed manner. So those of us who are running around are spending a lot of time, a lot of energy, frankly a lot of money, trying to make sure that you know there's an election, that you know what we stand for, that you understand what's at stake, maybe what's contrasting us from others. And I hope people plug in. I know it's hard when coming out of COVID the last couple of years, this feels like the first real summer where people were back to, vacations and feeling a little bit better about gathering together. So I think we're competing with the New England summer, which is really tough to do as much as we're competing with each other. But I hope people ultimately will get plugged in and recognize that what you do in that voting booth has a big outcome on your life in small ways and in large ways. And the more we can have both our young adults, our older adults, people who sometimes feel like government doesn't represent them involved, we will get better at representing them if you're active and engaged.
Yeah, 100%. And I have an insider tip to get people to vote.
Oh, please.
Make sure it's air conditioned. Make sure it's air conditioned.
I thought you were going to say bake sales. I'm pretty sure we do bake sales every time we vote.
Well, if the frosting is melting off the cupcake, I don't think it's going to matter.
That's true.
And it brings me to the next point, which is climate change.
Yeah.
It's so hot. It's September, and here in Massachusetts, it's supposed to be 90 degrees. I mean, it's still August, but it's gonna be September soon. 90 degrees.
Nationwide droughts. I mean, we're seeing the impacts in so many ways, right?
Yeah, and I was talking to my makeup artist today, and I said, "You're a citizen of Massachusetts. What are your biggest concerns for your life?" And she said, "The cost of housing. I'm trying to buy a house, or I'm thinking about buying a house. Transportation, and climate change." So are those the same topics that you are finding people in different parts of the state are concerned about?
Very much so. And those three are so intertwined, right? Mm-hmm. Housing, transportation, and climate crisis. When we think about them, a lot of the strategies, also help each, they feed off each other. I'd say the other two that I hear a lot about, transportation woes, obviously with all the challenges the T is having, but even outside of areas that are served by the MBTA, it's not always convenient or safe or affordable or effective. And so folks are trying to figure out, what are those alternatives that can really work? Mm-hmm. And then childcare, like the big childcare gaps. For so many of our working families, it's not only childcare that's either not available, but it's just not affordable. And I relate to that as a mom who had, at one point, 3 kids under the age of 5 and felt like we had a second mortgage, every month to have. And we were fortunate, right, to be able to have access to high quality childcare. Mm-hmm. But it's much harder now, I think, and that was not that long ago. So, but it's real. If you don't believe climate change is real and that we're not doing enough this year with all of the dramatic extreme weather conditions we're seeing, I don't know what will convince you. I mean, we have work to do. We need to lean into. We have not moved fast enough or deep enough as a country, and certainly, frankly, even as a Commonwealth, to address the climate crisis. And someday, our grandkids are going to ask us, like, what did you do? And right now, the answer is not enough. We have multiple fronts we need to lean into.
So, well, let me ask you, what would you do? What are your plans for this?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate in Salem that we worked with a neighboring community, the city of Beverly, to form a climate action plan. Why I think every community should have a climate action plan is because it helps assess what your greenhouse gas emissions, where they're coming from. You do the analysis on the ground. And to no one's surprise, but it was good to see it between our two communities, it's building and transportation. Those are the two key sectors that are leading to the greenhouse gas emissions in our communities. We were building and transportation. I think Beverly was transportation and building, so slightly separate in terms of the 1-2. And then you're working as a cohort with community leaders, with key stakeholders to identify, now that we have this analysis about greenhouse gas emissions, where they're coming from, what are some of the strategies that we can put in place to make sure we're addressing this? Both reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also building a more resilient future. And we're doing it as a partnership, right? These are two communities that both share a coastline, Salem Sound, both have a college, both have a hospital, have similar size populations, very much different geographies in terms of characters of neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So how should we attack this? Some of that is, some of the low-hanging fruit we've already done in my community. We have a municipal aggregation program, so all of the electricity we procure is 100% renewable for our community members in Salem. We've converted our street lights to LED, much more efficient. We're doing a ton of work within our own municipal assets to be more efficient in terms of how we're using electricity, how we're using our demand systems, working in concert with our utility providers. We've also tackled transportation. Our goal is to be a car-light community. Salem is only 8 square miles, so we moved forward with implementing a rideshare service. It actually started out as an age-friendly initiative because most of us are going to outlive our desire or ability to drive. And how are we going to get around? Like, good news, we're all living longer. So we have this on-demand rideshare service called Salem Skipper. You hail it like you would an Uber.
Cute.
Skipper,
Cute.
right? Waterfront community. You hail it like you would an Uber, except it's a ride share. So you might be sharing a ride with somebody else. It may not pick you up at your door. You might have to go to the end of your street. And we've given over 70,000 rides to date. And we started it during the pandemic to young adults, to folks who don't have a car, who don't own a car or can't afford a car, anywhere you want to go in Salem for $1. So, these are some of the ideas that we've had to reduce, getting those single occupancy vehicles off the road that came out of the Climate Action Plan. We've partnered that with a car share program. So we have cars that we bought, hybrid fleets that we've placed around our community that you can rent for a very low fee. It's $7 an hour through Get Around. It's an app we have, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Also designed to make sure you're not owning your own car. You can use this sharing economy to benefit, reducing costs for you. But still, when you need that access for a vehicle for someplace you need to go, you'll have the chance to do that. Whether it's your teacher's, your child's teacher, student appointment, or maybe you need to take the dog to the vet. Issues that real life that people have.
Right.
You don't live your life by a bus schedule. Sometimes you do need to have access to a car, but a lot of our cars sit in the driveway, or we have one person in a car, like single occupancy vehicle, like where the traffic. So how do we think about providing other ways? We also have a bike share. We have a city-owned ferry. Like, we're leaning in to this notion that everybody doesn't need a car. What are the alternatives? How do we have the infrastructure to support it? And that's these systems that we're talking about. And I think these are ideas that can be extrapolated. The opportunity to use innovation and technology to help with our transportation needs is something that we haven't necessarily taken off in Massachusetts. We've had a bit of an inspiration gap, frankly, around transit and transportation, not just because of the lack of investment in the MBTA, but other places where the geography is much different. When you go out to central and western Mass, the population numbers are smaller and the size of the communities are larger. So a typical bus system may not work, right? Nobody lives their life through that bus schedule. Here's where technology can be your friend. You can right-size vehicles. It can be more efficient. How do we think about more resilient building? We already adopted the stretch code in Salem many years ago, ahead of the time the state put it in place, but we need more efficiency as we think about when we're building new, and we need to convert buildings. So we're a partner community with National Grid right now on converting our older, heating systems to more efficient heat pump systems that will both save money and, again, be better, better for the environment in terms of the emissions and reducing those emissions. There's a lot of work we need to do, and this is, again, another connection of doing the work on the ground and then having a statewide perch means you can connect the dots in communities to help with both building a more resilient future and making sure we're operating more efficiently.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, because you talked about the West. I mean, we in the Boston area tend to be very focused on Boston, but there's a whole state there, and people are moving further and further out from the metropolitan areas because they can't afford to live closer into the city. And I'm sure that creates different needs and different priorities for people who are not in the immediate Boston area, or in the Cape and the Islands as well.
There's all kinds of pockets down in the South Coast, New Bedford, Fall River. They're closer to Rhode Island. Pittsfield's closer to New York, right? Springfield's closer to Connecticut. Like, these are regional economic areas, and the needs are different in these places in some ways, or the solutions might be different. Frankly, a lot of the needs are the same. The high cost of housing is everywhere. Whether you're in Western Mass or in Central Mass or in the South Coast, where housing might be a little bit more affordable than Greater Boston, it's not more affordable to the people who are living there. The workforce challenges, people cannot find enough help. A lot of that's connected to housing right now. So those are not unique to Greater Boston. The solutions might be different because of the character of the neighborhoods, but the needs are really the same in large parts of the Commonwealth. And at a time when we have historic resources, how do we push those in at the local level, push in those resources in a way that can help address these needs? As someone who's been a mayor, I certainly understand the value of that and really want to make sure we're championing the success of our communities.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. And throughout our entire interview, I keep hearing you talking about the communities, and that's so wonderful. So I'm curious, when, and now you're going from mayor to running for lieutenant governor, and I assume it's because, well, I shouldn't assume. Why are you doing that? Why are you making the leap from?
I mean, for me, it really is about recognition that as much as you can do a lot at the local level, and I appreciate it. I'm passionate about my community, and I'm passionate about the work of cities. You need a strong state partner to really maximize our efforts and tackle these challenges that we have on a statewide basis. Cities are a microcosm of what's happening at the state level. We just talked climate crisis, housing, transportation, strengthening our public schools, the work we have to do to close the childcare gaps that exist in many of our communities. Yeah, you have a knowledge base at the local level, but the only real way we're going to address those issues is with strong statewide support. And frankly, the state needs cities and towns to lean into this work. We're not going to solve it unless the symbiotic relationship is really working. And I think that's a language I love, one that I speak, and one that I can be a strong partner to our next governor and hoping we implement as we move forward. So that's my why as to why I think this lieutenant governor role is something that I can do well, and one I'm really excited about.
And I just heard you say the word why, and I want to finish up our interview talking more about you, the person, Kim, as opposed to the candidate. Where did this love of service come from, whether it's being a community member, a mayor, a lieutenant governor, but in the desire to serve at a bigger level?
I think for me, I didn't have parents who were super politically active. I mean, they voted. My dad, as I mentioned, is a career Navy man, born in Hawaii, lived all over. My mom is from Trinidad, so she's a naturalized U.S. citizen.
Wow.
And they were, terrific, parents, active and busy, but we're not into politics, I would say, in a big way. But I went to Salem State, go Vikings, proud public higher ed grad, and I had an internship. I was a political science major. I had an internship in our city's planning department and really fully understood, answering phones, helping with projects and initiatives that were happening on the ground, the value of solving problems for people. You'd be picking up the phone, answering the switchboard, and it would just be this array of issues, whether it was, a dead animal in the road to I can't find housing to a problem in my child's school. And you start to realize the impact that government has. And frankly, I went to work for the city of Chelsea when they came out of receivership and saw what happens when government doesn't work, right? Who pays the price for that? And for me, it's always been about recognizing that what you do during the day, I've been in private practice as well, so I've had some private government experience, and billable hours are great, bonuses are wonderful, but there's this different factor when you work in local government that you are giving back to your community and helping a place to get better. And there's something about that I find really attractive and really rewarding.
That's great. That's great. And I can tell that you love the state of Massachusetts as
do.
well. So what do you think makes Massachusetts the best state in the country?
Well, there's lots of things that we do well. Investments in education. You can be a commonwealth or a state. It doesn't have a legal distinction at all, but we're a commonwealth, and I think it speaks to the fact that we care about the common good. We're a place that has more health insurance for our residents than other places. We're a right to shelter state. So there are many things that we can beat our chest about from a value-based proposition that we care deeply about in this commonwealth. It also means that we should be willing to hold a mirror up to our Commonwealth and recognize the things that we're not doing well, where we have work to do. And we have work to do in housing, we have work to do in transportation, we have work to do in workforce. Some of these issues for me are just a moral issue. Like I really believe everybody should have a roof over their head that's safe and affordable. If you don't believe in things for moral reasons, for basic humanity, you better believe it. We're going to be at a competitive disadvantage if we don't figure out the housing, the transportation, the childcare. These challenges are very real, and add in climate. No one's going to outrun the climate crisis, right? And so, I think there's things that we do well here that we can be proud of. We just talked about all those fundamental freedoms, but we also can hold a mirror up to ourselves and get better, especially at a time when we have historic resources. And it's going to take people who have experience and who have intestinal fortitude, who have made decisions, who recognize that you're never going to have 100% unanimous support, but we really want to make sure we're engaged, thinking about outcomes, and moving forward. Not making a decision right now can be some of the worst things we could do. And I'm hoping to be a part of a team effort and a strong partner in this work.
And we are grateful for people like you. And I always like to ask, what are you most grateful for?
I've got an amazing family. This has been a busy summer for me, so I haven't been home as much as I'd like to. Everyone has a birthday. My kids are all, and my husband are both, are all summer birthdays, and so we've had quick celebrations, and I'm grateful to have a family that's willing to sacrifice spending time together so I can do this very long job interview, and I'm really grateful for them.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and best of luck to you on September 6th and beyond.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Thrive. And as always, until next time, here's to hitting all your high notes. Take care. Bye-bye.